welcome you all for today's program from the Indians, that is IPS South Zone and NIMHANS Digital Initiative for Academics and Nurturing Skills. Today's program is the hot topic of the era, that is mental health care discussion. I welcome you all. We have with us Dr. V. Ravi, who is the professor and head of neurovirology from NIMHANS. He's a senior professor here and he has his area of interest in public health virology, Japanese encephalitis, development of indigenous testing kits, and psychoneuroimmunology. We welcome you to the panel discussions. Without much ado, we'll open the panel discussion up now. Sir, can you tell what is coronavirus and what is COVID-19, sir?
Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for giving this opportunity. Coronavirus is a virus that has been around for a long time. The name corona it gets because under electron microscopy, it looks like a crown with projections. There are many coronaviruses that have been known to cause infections in human beings. There are about 4 coronaviruses that have been shown in the last 30-40 years to cause mild upper respiratory infections. And in 2002-2003, there was a coronavirus that caused severe acute respiratory syndrome. And that was called the SARS coronavirus. It caused an outbreak across the globe. Fortunately, in India, we did not have many cases. In 2012, another new one emerged, and that is called the MERS coronavirus, MERS standing for Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome. Fortunately, this virus also did not cause any problem in India. These are the 2 coronaviruses that cause severe acute respiratory infection. End of December last year, this new coronavirus, which is called Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2, SARS-CoV-2 as a short form, is a close cousin of the original SARS virus that emerged in 2002. But has its own distinct identity. It is only 70 to 80% similar to the SARS virus. The WHO in January gave the term COVID-19 to the disease. So the virus is called SARS-CoV-2 and the disease is called coronavirus-induced disease 19 because it emerged in 2019. So this is the difference between COVID-19 and SARS-CoV-2.
Thank you. So what are the symptoms of COVID-19 infection?
The symptoms of COVID-19 infection are depicted in the graph that you're seeing. The commonest symptom, which is almost invariably found in every patient, is fever. 90 to 95% of the patients have fever. Now, on what basis are we telling this? This whole graph is a summary of the experience of China. The WHO, World Health Organization, and the Chinese Center for Disease Control prepared a nice joint commission report where WHO went to China and audited 77,000 cases. So this is summary of 77,000 cases. We have a lot to learn from China. The second commonest symptom is dry cough. This is seen in approximately 70% of the people. The third being fatigue. The fourth being sputum production. Fifth being shortness of breath. Sore throat, myalgia, arthralgia, and diarrhea are found in a very small proportion of patients. Having said that, between fever, dry cough, and fatigue, 2 of the symptoms of these 3 will invariably be found in every COVID-19 patient. The manifestation of the disease is shown in a nice pyramidal graph here. This is, as I said, from 72,000 patients in Chinese records, compiled, analyzed, and the data is authentic. 80% of the people who get corona infection will develop a mild upper respiratory illness, which lasts for 5 to 6 days. It's a self-limiting disease. They don't have anything other than fever, cough, and maybe fatigue. 15% of the people will develop a little more severe infection, which may include shortness of breath, but they will not require ICU admission. 5% on top of the pyramid are the people who will develop critical illness. They will require intensive care admission, ventilatory support. Who are these 5%? These 5% are people above the age of 60 and those who have other comorbidities or health issues like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, hypertension, malignancy, and other chronic respiratory illnesses. The age distribution, again, analysis in China has shown both in Wuhan city and in the Hubei province that it's a disease predominantly of the age group 30 to 80. Having said that, people less than 30 also get infection to the tune of about 5% totally, and children for some good reason are spared. Let us not go into the details of why it is. I can take a question if you want. And people above 80 also are susceptible, and the mortality in people above 80 can go up to 25%.
How does it spread?
Coming to the transmission of COVID-19, we know from coronaviruses that it is predominantly droplet transmission. I'm sure all of you know what droplet transmission is. When a person who is sick and infected with the virus coughs or sneezes, he throws out a number of micro droplets which are not visible. This can travel up to a meter and contaminate surfaces around that person, plus his fomites. All this can be contaminated. And people, if they touch this with bare hands and accidentally subsequently touch their eye, nose, or mouth, can transfer the infection from the droplet to their mucous membranes and get infected. Beyond this, the question always asked is, how frequently do healthcare workers get infected, and is it a huge risk for healthcare workers? The answer is very clear. Analysis of 44,000 people in China has shown the nosocomial transmission, or among healthcare workers transmission carrying for a sick patient, is 3.8%. Initially, in January, the statistics was very alarming and it said 29%. But when WHO and China sat and went through all the records, they found that most healthcare workers initially in China had acquired the infection from one of their family members who had acquired it in the community. So the WHO position from the Joint Mission report is very clear. It is not a major mode of transmission. Having said that, healthcare workers are frontline soldiers, so they have to take appropriate precautions, most important being hand washing. And then if the patient is really sick and is coughing, they should wear a mask, they should wear personal protective equipment. Is it an airborne transmission is the next question that people ask. There is no evidence to say that there is airborne transmission because, as I said, the virus is found in high concentrations in droplet, and droplets do not travel in the air for long distances. So it is not an airborne transmission. It is only a droplet mode of transmission.
How can we safeguard ourselves from this?
Okay. I would encourage all of you to go to the WHO website and look at frequently asked questions. This is based on their experience of 70,000 patients in China that this has been drawn up. First and foremost is to have a high level of awareness. And today it is possible because of information explosion through social media, through print media, through electronic media. But be aware that a lot of misinformation also goes through it. So being aware and updated is very important for medical professionals. Thoroughly clean your hands with soap and water or alcohol-based rub. Alcohol-based rub should be used reserved for emergencies. Soap does the job very well. This is an enveloped virus, and this virus, when you wash with soap and water, the envelope is dissolved because it's made of lipid. As you know, soap is used to remove grease. The envelope dissolves, and the proteins in the envelope, which are important for the virus to attach to human cells, therefore drop off, and the virus is not capable of causing infection. So washing hands with soap and water frequently is a very important step. Also, trying to change our behavior. All of us are not used to this behavior earlier. We have the knowledge, but that doesn't translate into practice. Not to try and touch your nose, eye, or face with bare hands that have not been washed. This is easily said, but difficult to practice. This is a behavior change that we have to bring in ourselves. Our knowledge should change our attitude and result in the correct practice. Also, make sure that respiratory hygiene is practiced. Cough etiquette, as it is known as. If somebody has to cough, they have to do so by coughing into their elbow. If hands are otherwise busy, into their shoulder. The last resort is to cough into your hands, which you cup around your face or mouth, or use a hanky or tissue. But if you use a hanky or tissue around your mouth and nose, remember it's going to be contaminated. It has to be disposed of properly. Also, tell people, whoever has any respiratory symptoms and fever, that they should not go to work. They should stay away from work and seek medical assistance immediately. And when they are sick and they are having a cold and cough, they should wear a mask and go to their doctor and probably wear it at home as well. These are the major methods to prevent spread. Having said that, in a country where the infection in the last 24 hours is spreading very fast, it is important to practice social distancing. I will come to that in subsequent slides.
There is a panic over buying masks and hoarding sanitizers.
I think hoarding sanitizers, the government has passed an order that if anybody hoards sanitizers, they will be punished. As far as using sanitizers, as I said, it should be reserved exclusively for emergency when you can't find soap immediately. There is nothing to beat soap as far as keeping your hands clean and destroying the virus. There are several public health measures to contain transmission. The first and foremost is to isolate patients who are no COVID patients. It's advisable to have designated wards in existing hospitals. We are all not China. China built 2 new hospitals, but it's time that we apply our mind and segregate wards in hospitals to be prepared for any catastrophe that may occur. Second thing is self-quarantining. This is very important. I think people who are unwell should not go to work. I mentioned that already, and they should stay at home. And there are guidelines for quarantine, which I will tell you subsequently. There's a separate question for that. And keep monitoring symptoms so that if your symptoms are worsening, or if initially itself you want to see a doctor, please go and see a designated healthcare facility for this infection. Social distancing. What is social distancing? I think there are many terms used: medical distancing, social distancing. All of them mean to maintain a 1 meter distance in interactions that require it. It may not be possible always to do socially distance, but all your routine activities of talking to a patient, talking to your friends, talking to anybody can be voluntary activities can be curtailed with social distancing of 1 meter. Avoiding congregations. A group of even 10 can be bad if somebody is infected. That is why government has closed schools, colleges, shut down malls, cinema theaters, restaurants. All these measures have been practiced in China. And as you know from the media, China has overcome. They have had only 30 cases in the last 24 hours. China did it by a lockdown and ensuring people practice social. This having said, the other measures that countries have taken, you are all aware. I won't go into details. Travel restrictions, travel screening, and evacuation of people of different nationalities to their parent country.
Having said about isolation and self-quarantine, there are many people, especially this is for the students and medical personnel. So if you are staying in a hostel, say for example, and I have been asked to home quarantine myself, and I stay in a shared accommodation or shared hostel. So what precautions should I take? Can I use the common bathroom? Can I use?
This is a notification from the government of Karnataka. It is also available on the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare website, guidelines for home quarantine. The do's and the don'ts are very clearly laid out. The do's are, as in when you are asked to quarantine at home, as far as possible or ideally, you should stay in a separate room that is well ventilated with an attached bathroom. If such facility is not possible, minimal use of the bathroom and make sure that nobody else is in the bathroom when you go there. This is a precautionary measure. Washing hands, respiratory hygiene, keeping separate utensils for the person who is under quarantine, minimal contact or as far as possible, no contact, but that is not possible. So minimal contact with family members or your roommates or your hostel mates. So be confined to your room. Now this is for a period of 14 days. Now the don'ts are, under no circumstance violate this. You may feel that you are all right, but it is not proper. You have seen in the papers today how some people have violated self-quarantine rules. Now this puts the entire society at risk. Every person has a responsibility to take care of themselves. More importantly, if they are unwell or if they have a history of a possible contact, they should not do anything that will put others to risk. So these are the guidelines, and also the clothes of the person should be washed separately, preferably soaking it in some disinfectant. Any of the disinfectants that you use, like Dettol or these things, are fine. Soak it for some time and wash it.
This is if people have been asked to
self-quarantine. If there are people with symptoms who are to be quarantined, this, as of now, India is able to do quarantine of people with symptoms in hospitals. But if the spread increases enormously, then we may have to practice this at home as well. But remember, a person who has symptoms has to be in regular touch with a doctor every day through phone and tell the doctor how they are feeling. Are they better than yesterday? Are they worse than yesterday? Did a new symptom come that was not there yesterday? These are simple things that we have to educate people who are under quarantine.
If a person who is staying, say, in a shared accommodation and having a travel history and having a history of contact with another person with COVID-19 positive, they refuse to get isolated, what can we do in such situation?
We have to counsel that person, tell the person nicely. If the person does not listen, then one has to invoke the law. The law is very clear on this, that nobody can do anything that will put others to danger. The Epidemic Act is there. and there are recent statutory things that the government has published on the Gazette. We should not go to that level, I feel, of forcing. Counseling a person will always help. It only requires, because people are scared of isolation. I can understand that if somebody is told they have to isolate themselves for 14 days, it's something that people have not used to it. But if you explain to them in a proper way, counsel them, I'm sure they will agree to it. But they should not definitely share a room with others in the hostel, and they cannot say, I will refuse quarantine and I will not quarantine myself. That is not correct. At that time only the act has to be invoked.
As we can see, it's an 125-year-old act which can be evoked, but let us pray that
it is not necessary.
Say, for example, if my roommate or in the house somebody is ill, like say, for example, they have a dry cough, they have fever, but they don't have any history of contact with any COVID-19 positive person. What shall we do in such situations?
Any people with fever and any respiratory infections, it is good to practice self-quarantine till we are sure that we have reached the stage of China, which is there are no new cases being reported in the community. This is an opportunity for us to improve our hygiene and our practices, and I'm sure this will go a long way in future also in preventing so many other respiratory infections that we get. There are two questions people always ask me. It was not in your list, but let me answer those questions. The first is, who should wear a mask? People who have any respiratory symptoms, fever with cold, cough, sneezing, definitely should wear a mask. People who are caring for infected people who have these symptoms should wear a mask to protect themselves. Entire public need not wear a mask. For the simple reason, A, there is an acute shortage of masks. It is not required because it's not an airborne infection. Having said that, I know many people I see in the road even today wearing masks and going around. But I don't know how many people know how to use a mask. A mask should be worn in such a way that there is no gap between the nose, the face, and the mouth, the chin, and the bottom part of it. It should be tightly worn. Number two, masks have to be changed 4 to 6 hours because the moisture in our breath wets the mask. Once a mask is wet, virus can travel through the water molecules across. And third thing, when you wear a mask, quite often people tend to put their finger through the mask and scratch their nose and mouth and they will not wash their hands. So nothing is more important than washing hands. Use a mask judiciously, reserve masks for people who require them. The second question people ask me is, how long does the virus survive on surfaces? As far as COVID-19, the new SARS-CoV-2 virus is concerned, the new virus, there is no data as of now that is published in peer-reviewed journals, but we know from the cousins, MERS and SARS viruses, that it can survive on surfaces for 6 to 8 hours minimum and a maximum of several days. What will determine this? Obviously, the environmental conditions will depend. In a cool, moist, humid atmosphere, it will last much longer because the droplet will not dry. Why do we say dry surfaces are safe? It's an envelope virus. When a droplet dries, the envelope disintegrates. Once the envelope disintegrates, the virus is no longer capable of causing infection. Having said that, if you ask my opinion, I would say till this whole thing subsides, every surface is contaminated. Go with a view that every surface is contaminated. There can be a virus anywhere. Take precautions, wash your hands before you touch your face. So this is something that everybody should practice. I will again reiterate, our protection is our responsibility. Being in a mental health institute, I would like to give one message. No patient ever wants to come and give an infection to you. I'm yet to see that. These are movie stories. patients are human beings. Not every human being is a villain. Even if they are villains, we should know how to take care of ourselves. There is no point in blaming, saying Dr. Chetan gave infection to Dr. Ravi. It is Dr. Ravi's responsibility to wash his hands. Now there is enough information. So I think we'll have to put that information into action.
Say, for example, if a person who has history of cough but unavoiding uh, mental or neurological illness, so they come to hospital. So then, ideally, we should wash our own hands. We should wipe the surfaces which they have come in contact with, rather than blaming the person.
Exactly. Hospitals also and healthcare facilities should also prepare for this. Our hospital has put several protocols into place. Maybe the initial questions is to ask is, how are you? Do you have fever? Do you have cough? Do you have cold? Have you traveled anywhere? Start from there. Keep the patient at a distance. Of course, this will not apply to emergency. In emergency, there are separate protocols. I will not go into those protocols now because it takes time. So there are two segregated areas in emergencies. Those who come with code red, who need to be intubated, they have to be handled separately. Those who come with an emergency where they're conscious and they can be asked a few questions, that's a separate protocol. So you're right when you say that we should take precautions, wipe all our surfaces in our area where we are seeing patients, and wash hands regularly.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your time. I do understand that we have a COVID management meeting scheduled at 3:30. So, but we'll take up a few questions now. If there are people who want to ask questions, you can raise your hands through the chat. You would unmute your mic and then you could ask questions, or do ask the questions in the chat. So there's some of the questions which have come, sir. Should hospitals give holiday for 1/3 of employees every 2-3 days, 2 days or 2 weeks, so that there is reserve force on standby?
There is no universal answer for this. Each hospital should have its own policy. They should work out. But what I would say is have a plan in place. Things can get worse. I'm not saying they are worse. They can get worse. The next 3-4 weeks will be very crucial for India. So I think each hospital with its workload and dynamics of patient inflow, they should plan accordingly. These are some protocols that have been followed in hospitals across the country and across the globe as well.
There is a question from Dr. Jagdisha Tirthali. Says, I have touched a doorknob in a public place and later my pen, my laptop and my phone with the same hand. I later use hand sanitizer to clean my hand before I touched my face. Now, is it likely that my pen, laptop and my phone may carry viruses? Should all those be sanitized?
The answer is yes. Once you have touched a contaminated surface and touched 100 objects, take it that all the 100 objects are going to be contaminated. So practice your hand washing. Whenever you touch anything, imagine it can have virus and take appropriate precautions.
Why there is high mortality in Italy?
Italy has the highest population beyond 60 years of age, number one. Number two, it is a little less than a month that it broke out in Italy. China also had very high mortality in the first month. By the time the healthcare facilities prepare to handle, then the mortality comes down and protocols are put in place. Third, most important, beds have to be kept ready. So we are in an advantageous position. We can learn from others. So let us now start planning in each of our facilities, preparing for beds, assuming that we may have an outbreak on our hands. Having said that, as healthcare professionals, it is a nice idea to let your patients know unless there is an emergency, they need not, if something can be postponed of their pertaining to their illness, they can come a little later. Many hospitals are following this. Guidelines are also being issued by central government and respective state governments that the crowd can be minimized by telling them if there's a prescription that is needed, it can be given for a month for long-term prescriptions. So, and already we are seeing dip in our OPD attendance at NIMHANS by 25-30%. So this is a good way of discouraging people coming to healthcare facilities if it is not needed.
Before admitting a patient, what should we do in our ward? Are there any precautions?
As I said, when a patient comes to a healthcare facility, a quick run of 5 to 6 questions, which are available on the Ministry of Health website. That should be the first history taking, and then triaging at that stage itself. This could be a potentially infected person. This looks to be a normal person. So having 2 channels and following the protocols, for which one good way is in the next few days, if a drill can be practiced. I'm actually now, after this meeting, going into a meeting at NIMHANS where we are going to do a drill tomorrow, and we are preparing for the drill. So drills are very useful. These are like war times. This is a war. So those of you who have lived through wars in 60s will know that how we prepared for wars. So I think people should start applying their minds, planning for emergencies, and expecting a huge outbreak will help in a long way. Half of any activity is planning. So people should apply their minds to it.
Who should wear N95 masks?
N95 masks are definitely prescribed for people who are caring for severely infected people, those who are likely to do intubations, because during intubation somebody can cough. So these are respiratory masks. They are extremely uncomfortable to wear. I can assure you, I have worn N95 many times when I have processed specimens for dangerous pathogens. So it should not be that it is not available for the people who need it. So let's reserve it. A triple layered surgical mask, the green one that you see, is good enough to protect you from whatever your fears are. But a respirator mask like N95 should be reserved for people in the healthcare.
What about essential travel within India?
What is essential? What is not essential? You are the best judge. If I have to go for my brother's son's wedding, in my opinion, it's not essential. If you have to go for an emergency, for an unfortunate incident like death or something, you take a call. So emergency or not emergency is something that cannot be defined. But any non-essential travel should be postponed for the next 3 to 4 weeks. Let's learn to sit at home and learn to spend that time usefully.
What precautions should mental health professionals take in terms of personal protective equipments and other protective equipments when they come in contact with those in quarantine?
I have already mentioned the same protection that any healthcare professional takes, mental health professionals also have to take. If we are dealing with symptomatic patients in psychiatry, neurology, neurosurgery, who's having fever, cough, then we should protect ourselves. We should also ensure that the patient is kept in isolation. We should start planning for it. We should ensure that way we can protect ourselves. And of course, if the patient is really sick or in ICU, one definitely has to wear PPE and N95 mask. And then most important is all people who wear masks should also remember disposing them in the appropriate manner is their responsibility. You chose to wear a mask, you better dispose it properly. Otherwise, that could be a source of.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. Time. And if there are any questions, I'm sure Dr. Chetan will be able to answer. If not, you can send it to him and I will address your questions. Thank you all very much for the opportunity. Thank you.
We thank Dr. V. Ravi, sir, for his timely and lucid presentation and answering our questions.